Now let's zoom all the way out just to put a finishing touch on this. Not go to a specific neighborhood or industry. The question we're asking is immigration and immigrant labor a net positive or a negative? The Economist magazine, which is sort of the authoritative one in that field, says nobody knows. Quote, the problem is that it's almost impossible to separate cause and effect. If a country with high rates of immigration also sees strong wage growth, we cannot assume that immigrants are boosting wages. It may well be the case that the migrants are choosing to move to places with stronger economies. To figure out what we do know and whether this discussion can be detached from cultural or political sentiments, I spoke with Henry Curr. He's a writer for The Economist, and he gave us some good perspective. Henry, I think the word of this entire discussion is nuance. Because when you look at the data, and at The Economist, you do this in depth, there might be specific industries that are affected more harshly by, let's say, illegal immigration. But when you look broad picture, what do you find?
Well, economists would tend not to look at specific industries when they're looking at the impact of something like immigration. They tend to look at the very big picture, what's it doing to the labour force as a whole. And the problem is, when you're talking about illegal immigration, it's actually very difficult to identify in the economic data who the undocumented migrants are. For understandable reasons, undocumented migrants are not so keen to say, I'm over here. Yeah. And so if you ask them their documented status, you're unlikely to get an accurate response. However, we do know that undocumented migrants tend to be less skilled than documented migrants. That's partly because there's hardly any legal avenue for unskilled migrants to enter the country. And what we know about unskilled migrants is they raise average wages in the economy. That's pretty much widely agreed. But they can have kind of distributional effects that hurt some people.
How overall do they see overall wages going up?
There are economists who would dispute what I told you a moment ago, who would say that their models show that actually unskilled migrants reduce the wages of American workers, particularly American workers without a high school education. Generally, as I said, the consensus view among economists would be that it raises average wages but harms the wages of previous generations of migrants.
Here's the interesting part, though, is that if, let's say, illegal labor detrimentally impacts people who are low-skilled, low-educated by and large, those also happen to be the citizens and the workers who are most sensitive to prices. And we've seen that prices of products, even made here in the U.S., can be reduced sometimes if you do have this labor that's brought in under the table.
Absolutely. So to the extent that wages fall when you get more migration, that's obviously good for prices, and that's actually the mechanism by which the economic models will show the gains to everyone else coming, because prices will fall if you can produce things more cheaply. That's a good thing. Of course, the implication of that is you've produced it more cheaply because wages are lower, which shows you that there's some kind of distributional thing happening behind that average good effect.
When you're talking to stakeholders in your coverage at The Economist, do you feel like talking points or data points supersede?
The key thing to do is to talk to as many people as possible and read as much research as possible, and only then can you really get to the bottom of what your view is, because of course economics is a disputed science. There's no perfect answers here.